to the cloud. All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I'm so excited for our first episode of Baton Talk in 2021. And I'm even more excited that our first guest is Dr. Praise Matemavi. She's a childhood friend, a sister. uh, She's a lot of things. So I won't even try to introduce her because I will not do it justice. So I will let you, Praise, tell us who you are in a nutshell, and we'll jump into this. I am so excited. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been a conversation I've been looking forward to. When you contacted me and you said, "Oh, let's do this talk," I was like, "Oh my gosh, yes, I am in for it." So thank you so much for inviting me to your first episode this year. I'm really excited to get into it. My name is Praise Matemavi, and I am a mother, a wife. I am an abdominal transplant surgeon at the University of Mississippi Medical Center. I am originally from Zimbabwe, and I am Zimbabwe's first Zimbabwe's first multi-visceral transplant surgeon. So I'm hoping with time I'll be able to go back to my home country and be able to contribute in what I have spent most of my life learning to do, and also bring something to sub-Saharan Africa. So that's me.
Woo! Yes. So many roles, so many hats you wear and wear so gracefully. So for those of you who are just tuning into Baton Talk for the first time, this is where we try to analyze and see what are those batons and messages we have received in our lives, that some we want to continue because they promote healing and they serve us, and others we come to know that they actually do not serve us and we let go. Sometimes we don't even know we're holding these messages. So I am gonna keep insisting on calling you doctor. I know you don't care for that. You don't mind.
No.
I think it's important.
Yeah, not in the hospital, girl.
But I don't know if you saw that article where they were trying to undermine Jill Biden's doctorate because it was a medical, so all these pieces too of what that means, right? For a woman to be called all these titles. But for the sake of this, I'll call you just Praise. So your story, I couldn't think of anybody more appropriate for our theme this month, which is new beginnings. It's January. Everybody feels like, okay, we get another chance at whatever it is we have not achieved in the last year. Um, and you have recreated and rebirthed yourself, your career, your values, your community in so many different ways. Like you have broken so many glass ceilings. You're the first woman transplant surgeon in a whole country, right? So you have had to do a lot to get to where you are. So I'm just going to make it free flow of where you share with us, kind of start us from where you want to, but how it all began. So where did this start, the journey?
So, I grew up in Zimbabwe and we moved to Michigan when I was 14 and a half. And so Barron Springs, Michigan, that will always be home for me.
Yeah, good old Marion. I was 14 too when I moved here.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Huh.
So, it's like when you move at that age, you up at an age where you are very impressionable still, because it's quite a different transition. So even though you are Zimbabwean, you end up with, like, going into adulthood with American cultures and American values, even though you are Zimbabwean at home. But the the change, you're not really American, but you're also not really Zimbabwean, because for those people that moved to the States when they were older than me, they still have different things that they held on to from our culture. And so it's like you don't feel like you're Zimbabwean enough, but you also don't feel like you're American enough. And so you really don't, you find it very difficult to fit in.
Yes.
So being a pastor's child, you know how easy it is for us to adapt, because pretty much all our life we've had to adapt. from the time I went to first grade to the time I ended up graduating high school at Barron Springs High School, I had gone to a total of 7 schools. So, it's like you're going to a different school all the time. When you arrive to that school, you know how girls are. Girls have their little friendships and their little cliques. So by the time you get to a different school, everybody already has their friendships. So you don't really get to connect so much with others. And you'll be leaving soon, if not in a year, maybe even less. So you tend to be friends with sort of everybody. So you're like everybody's friend, you're friends with everybody, but you don't have your own like close group. So that's kind of how it was for me. I was friends with everybody, the girls that I would walk home with from school and things like that. And then I went to boarding school when I was 12. And so boarding school is where I actually developed my first real like best friend, who is still my best friend to this day.
Wow.
Yes. So, it's like even with, moving to the States, and she was in Zimbabwe, and then eventually she moved to the States too. So, it's like I'm the kind of person who is friendly with everybody, and I have many, many acquaintances. But when it comes to my close circle, it's, you can actually count on one hand.
Yes. And part of that is that connection, right? So you're already learning why invest in deeper connections if I'm going to move. So as a
Right.
survival guide, you can get along with everyone, but you know better than making real connections.
Exactly.
Ah.
Exactly. And so that was kind of like, my background coming here, growing up in Michigan. And so at the age of 18, I became pregnant. And this was out of wedlock. I wasn't married, got pregnant, ended up losing the scholarship that I had. And here I am, a pastor's daughter, showing up at home and telling them I'm pregnant. So that was a very challenging time, not the most challenging time in my life, I have to say, because I already knew what my values were and what my morals were. And I knew for me, an abortion was not an answer.
Right.
Because of the way I was raised and the way I had my own values, even despite having, multiple people in the church who were pressuring me to look at abortion, because
So for those who might not even know what that seems like or what that really involved, even if you were in the US, right? Berrien Springs it had a big African community, a lot of Africans, right?
African Adventist community.
Adventists, right? So Adventist is a Christian, usually very conservative. So for those who don't know, I don't want to make any assumptions that we all understand what that means for an 18-year-old to come home pregnant in this community. So what are some of those buttons or those messages that even before you showed up to your home, that they're already running through your mind? What, for those who don't know what this, you and I understand, you just say that, I'm like, oh yeah.
Yes. And it's like, first of all, it's the fear that my mom is going to kill me. And and because growing up, that was like forefront center in a home where it was just me and my sister. We didn't have any brothers, so it's like that was the biggest thing that was like drilled in our heads: no sex before marriage. And how some of these buttons that we talk about, it's about basically you have it in your head that if you do something like that, which is something bad, because you're having sex before you're married, then one, not only is it a big sin, two, nobody's gonna want to marry you, because nobody's going to want to marry a non-virgin, because this is what our culture had ingrained in us. And three, that, oh, now you're damaged goods. You know how I hate that phrase? I hate that phrase so much, because it has led so many women to believe that they are damaged goods. And in my culture, we have to pay, the men's side has to come and pay lobola, which is the bride price.
Right.
And so when they come to pay for your bride price and you're pregnant before you're wed, they have to pay damages on top of the bride price. So, what this message is giving to these young women is that you are damaged. You're not good enough anymore. And
Mm.
so I have to say that I had that notion in me that I was not good enough anymore. So that also helped to in my decision making of what my life was going to look like after that, to decide really that, okay, so you want me to marry this guy that I don't even love? Yes, I made a mistake, I got pregnant, but you want me to get married to this man? Then I will get married to this man, because I am damaged goods now and nobody's ever going to want me after this. So it was very easy for me to get married at 18 to somebody that, I didn't love, and I'm sure he didn't love me at the time. And it was just a way to fix that situation and
Mm.
to take away the embarrassment that I had brought on to my family. My parents were well known in the community. My dad was well known in Zimbabwe. So I felt like I was doing something good to kind of fix that problem, because now they can say, well, she got pregnant when she was 18 before she got married, but at least she's now married
To the same guy.
to the same guy. Yes.
Because that also matters for
Oh,
whatever reason.
for sure. Yes.
Woo,
So
okay.
that was kind of the beginning of, to me, that was really the beginning of my story.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So those are a lot of messages that at 18 you have to now fix
Yep.
what they are considering shame. They've brought on the family name, and you have to fix that by really sacrificing your whole life, right? By getting married at 18. Who knows what the heck they're thinking at 18, right? If we think back on when we're 18 and all of that, and what that does for your self-esteem. So now you're damaged. Even if you do get married, let's even pretend you loved this guy and you thought he was the love of your life at 18, who, very few people really get that accurate.
Yeah.
But you get in a marriage feeling like you're less than, that you wouldn't even get a full price bride
Yeah.
price, which is another conversation. But okay, so here we are. That's what they've made you feel like, and now you are trying to correct your mistake and fix their honor, so to speak.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, what happens next now, walking into a marriage at 18 as damaged goods, and now
Yeah.
going to be a mother?
And so, I always say that for an 18-year-old, there are some people who know and they do fine and they get married and they live happily ever after. But for the majority of us, first of all, you don't even know who you are.
Right.
How can you be able to sustain such an important relationship? Because, it's different from our parental and sibling relationships. You have no choice in that. It's like you're brought into that relationship, and it's because of that strong tie that you have. For the most part, most of us, we make it work. It doesn't matter that my sister did this to me. We know that we'll come back and we'll work on it. Now you're putting your life with somebody who has their own set of values and their own way of thinking and their own experiences and their own childhood traumas that you are bringing into a relationship with you, with your own baggage. And before you even really know who you are, how do you expect to be able to make this relationship work?
Right, you're
So,
set up for failure.
yeah, and it's one of those things that I say to young women, even in their 20s, that before you get into a marriage relationship, you need to know who you are. Because otherwise, if you don't know who you are, when strife comes into a marriage, and when issues start happening, you will not have a leg to stand on.
Mhm.
And so for me, then I was in this marriage, which ended up being an abusive relationship. It was an abusive marriage, emotionally, physically, mentally, psychologically. It was just a horrible place to be. But then remember where I came from. I came from where I had made this huge mistake. So already I was thinking, I made this bed, now I have to lay in it. So I did not go to my parents and tell them that I was going through all this. difficulty, all this pain, you know, I dealt with it on my own. There was infidelity. There were girls who would call me at the house because they thought I was cheating. They thought he was cheating on them with me. You know?
You were the wife.
And I'm like, well, I'm the wife and the mother of his child. I mean, what are you talking about? So it's like just that kind of trauma. So when you're in a relationship like that, that leaves you with the lowest of the lowest self-esteem. Well, it leaves you with no self-esteem, not even low self-esteem, with no self-esteem. So it took a while for me to realize that being in that kind of relationship was not good for me. But let's take this to the next level, which is talking to your senior women. That there was one woman that I trusted that I would talk to about things because I didn't feel I was able to go talk to my mom because I didn't want to stress her about that. And also I wanted to try to make it work in my relationship without having to bring on divorce. And now the other horror.
The other biggest letdown.
You know, for my parents. And so I went to one of my senior women advisors and I told her what was happening. And she told me, oh, my dear, this is just how men are. And, you know, it's like in Shona, it was, which is, this is just how men are. Men will eventually, they take time to mature. You guys are young. He's in his early 20s. Give him time to mature and to grow. A lot of men are abusive in the beginning, but you know, when they get settled in the home, they will get better. And most men that I know cheat on their wives, and it's okay, you know? And I was like, well, first of all, this is why there is a point in time in Zimbabwe where the HIV/AIDS rate was 1 out of every 3 to 4 adults, because we said, what? No, this is just how men are. So women were not at home protecting themselves. And then with divorce being such a taboo in our culture, not only culturally, but also in our religious denomination, people remain in these unhappy, unhealthy relationships. And for the fact that, I do not want to embarrass my family. In my case, it was not about me, really. It was because I didn't want to embarrass my family again.
Right. And so as a culture, as a denomination, we have normalized toxicity and abuse over shaming, whatever they consider shaming, or maintaining this public view of,
Yes.
I have a family, I'm married, or using that as a point of worth. Like,
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Worth, because for us growing up, it was mostly, for me, I knew growing up from the age of 4 that I wanted to be a doctor, and from the age of like 10 that I wanted to be a surgeon, even though I had no idea what that really was, but I knew. So it was like, I knew I was going to be a doctor, but I also knew I was going to get married and I was going to have children. And even with all the academic success that I had, to me, the ultimate success was being married. Yeah. Like being married, having a husband, having a home, because really, if you weren't married, you didn't really have a home because it was just you, you know? And so to me, that was like, okay, that's like, okay, becoming a doctor was here and getting married was like here.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's such a wrong way of looking at things. Who said that our marriage is the ultimate success? But that's how it was ingrained in us.
Yes. Those were the batons passed down to the point that someone you trusted, someone who loves you, and you know they don't mean any harm, but they're okay with you being hit, versus you divorcing or leaving this situation, because that's, for them, that's worse than their own child being, I mean, not, it wasn't your parent, but like, for a lot of
it.
Yeah.
It.
And that's crazy.
Yes.
So this is the power of these batons and messages passed on. that we lose sight of what we would say is our value. Nobody would ever say, I wish this harm on my child.
Right.
But when the choice came to saving you versus having you as a divorced woman in the community, they would
Yeah.
rather you take a few hits and maybe potentially get HIV because you don't know where he's at.
Right. You
Whew.
have no idea. And so for me, it was, getting, and so it's like, it becomes mental for you too. Because one, you think, okay, first of all, I now have these two kids um, who nobody's ever gonna want me. And I was already fine with that I would be a single mom for the rest of my life, which was totally fine with me. But then you have that in the back of your mind. And then number two, you have this burden that now you're causing this additional embarrassment to your parents, who have been nothing but the greatest parents to you ever. So it's like you have that guilt and shame. And then number three, you're looking at just your kids and you're saying, well, now my kids are going to have to grow up in a broken home. I don't know what that means, because I grew up in a very, very loving home with both my parents there. And but then you also look at your kids, and I would look at my son, he was 2 at the time, and I'd look at my daughter, who was 4 at the time, and I would say, first of all, I do not want my son growing up thinking it's okay for a woman to be treated this way, because as he grows older, he's going to be seeing the way his father treats me, and he's going to think it's okay, because that's just what he knows. And I don't want my daughter to grow up thinking that it's okay to be treated this way. So that's when I made the decision. My kids actually gave me the strength to leave. And so that's when I made the decision. Despite what was going to happen, I did not care. Thank God I just never have been one of those people to care what people say or what the community says, because people always have something to say.
Oh yeah.
So I was like, okay, this is it. I'm leaving. So the first time I left, I packed my bags, packed my kids up. He had gone for a weekend somewhere partying. So I left. And I was at work on a Sunday, and he came back from his thing, and he went to my parents' house, which is where I had gone to. I told my parents were appalled. They had no idea, because what happens in an abusive relationship is that the abuser isolates you from your community and from the people that love and care about you. So my best friend, who I had been best friends with in Michigan, Rowena, she and I had been best friends in high school, and we were so close. And he had managed to put a rift between us.
Of
And
course.
so it's like now I was isolated from her. I was isolated from my own family, because he would make me feel guilty for talking to my parents every day. I'm like, but even up to now, I talk to my dad every single day, and I am 39 years old. I mean, it's like, it's a ritual. When I am driving from work, I have to call my dad, because if I don't call him, then he's like wondering, whoa, what's going on? What happened? So on days that I don't work, if I'm not driving home, I have to make time to give him his call, you know? And so it's like, I've always been so close to my parents, and it's like 2-3 minute talk. Ooh, what does
Right.
that take away from you?
And that's the power of an abuser, right? They make sure you doubt even the most basic thing, right? That's something that anybody with a good relationship wants to do every day. But they
Absolutely.
make you feel so guilty, isolate you, that you start doubting your own values. You start doubting your every thought you have, or
Yes.
you're in fear. So wow. So
Yeah.
you packed up and left because I keep putting this in my own messaging, which is like at that point you are not passing this on to your kids.
No,
You can
absolutely
see
not.
that this trauma will go another generation, and that's where you drew the line. If
Yes,
not for me, I'll do it. I'll drop this before it happens to my children.
absolutely. And that was so powerful for me. And so, that first time he came and he forcefully took the kids away from my parents. And my parents had no say, even though my dad, did call the cops, but the cops could do nothing, because he was the father of the children and there was no order of any kind. So he forcefully took the kids, and he basically told me, if you ever want to see your kids again, you're going to come back. And for a mother, you know what that does to you. Like
Yeah.
you will do anything for your children. And so I ended up going back because I was afraid of what could happen to my children.
Right.
And you know, he was a good dad, but are you really a great dad when you are good to your children, but you are not as responsible in caring for them? You leave them alone when they are 4 and 2, and you treat their mother in a
Mm-hmm.
bad way. So how good of a dad are you? Because I hear this a lot from women saying, you know, he's like that to me, but he's really a good dad. So yeah, he's a good dad because when you see him interacting with his kids, he's loving. But how much of a good dad is he really when he treats you that way
Mm-hmm.
and when he does things that are questionable?
That are harmful to the kids. Like that's
Right.
traumatizing to take kids forcefully from their grandparents just as a way of holding control over you. Like, right? So that's, yeah, no. Playing
Absolutely.
with kids is not enough to call somebody a good dad.
No.
And we have a little bar for what that means, right? To be a father
Yes.
versus, yeah,
Yes.
sorry.
So then my story goes on. You know, I eventually was able to leave, and he eventually left the country. And so that was like a time for me to be able to start rebuilding. And so that was, you know, now here I am, I'm a single mom of two. And at that time, during all that time, I went to nursing school. So I was in nursing school, and because, you know, pre-med was not paying the bills, I needed a job to take care of my kids.
Yeah.
Nursing school, and I was already working as a nurse. And I loved my job. I had a great job. I had a great community at work. And so now it was okay, I'm back to having control of my life. Now I can focus on rebuilding my life and achieving all those dreams that I've had for myself. So the first thing I did was sit down with my notebook and I wrote down what my goals were. At this
Mhm.
time, I was 23. So 23, divorced, single mom of two. I basically like just kind of pulled myself out. I was never really in the community. Yeah, I'd see people at church or whatever, but I basically just pulled myself away from the community to focus on myself, on my goals, because sometimes those people they
Yeah.
will tear you down when you're trying to build yourself up.
Whew. The
So
power of those around you.
yeah,
Yeah.
so sometimes it is so important to just pull back. And at that time, I wrote in my notebook, I have to have started medical school by the time I'm 25, because I have to have graduated medical school by the time I'm 29. I have to have become a doctor by the time I'm 29. And I have to pursue my goal of becoming at that time, I wanted to be a cardiothoracic surgeon. And so, you know, I sat down, wrote my goals, and then decided it's not just good enough to write your goals, right? You have to write your goals and then figure out step by step exactly what are you going to do to achieve those goals.
Mm-hmm.
So then I went to my brochures, LMC at Lake Michigan College, community college, and
Yeah.
I was like, what are the classes that I can take at LMC? First of all, I looked, you know, I didn't have an advisor. I didn't have anybody to advise me, no college advisor to tell me these are the classes you need, this is what you need. But thank God Google was there. Google was my advisor.
Shout out to Google.
Dr. Google was there. So I went to Google and I looked at a number of medical schools that were in proximity to home, you know, within like a 5-6 hour drive to home,
Mm.
because I needed the support of my parents to help me take care of my children while I pursued this dream. And so I looked at all the medical schools that I could find in that region. And I looked at what are the requirements to get into medical school. Number one requirement, you need a bachelor's degree. I did not have that. Number two requirement, you need the MCAT. I did not have that. Number three requirement, you needed all these science classes, physics, general chemistry, organic chemistry, biology, a year of each. And then some schools wanted you to have genetics, microbiology, and I forgot the other third one, which I did not have. But I looked at the ones that only required those four major ones that you needed to be able to pass the MCAT. And I was like, okay. So I wrote down my list of the 16 schools. And I then took a brochure from Lake Michigan College to look for the classes that I needed. I found the classes, but because of the times that you needed and the labs that you needed for each class, because all these classes were 5 credits each. So, and they required lab. I couldn't do them all at Lake Michigan College. So I took the Southwestern Michigan College brochure, and I was like, I'll take classes at LMC and at SMC. So then I was able to take biology and general chemistry at LMC, and then organic chemistry and physics at SMC. And at the time working as a nurse, I was able to work as what they had was a weekend alternative job position where I could work every single weekend and then 1 8-hour shift every other Friday. And then I would have the week off. And I was still paid more than the people that were working during the week because people at that time did not want to work weekends. They had things to do. I didn't.
Well, you did, but you chose what you could have.
That's true. I could have.
But you had your goals, and they had to get accomplished.
I was focused. I knew exactly what my price was, and I was like laser focused on that.
Wow.
Sorry,
can you pinpoint what it was that motivated you? Because I mean, at that point, you could have had any excuse not to do all this, right? You have 2 kids. You've been divorced and abused, right? You could play victim and say, you know what, I'm just gonna take care of my kids and be a nurse. It pays the bills.
Oh, it pays not only the bills, but it paid very well.
Right, nurses can make some real good money. What was it about your dream? As soon as you were able to get yourself out of this situation, what was that? If you can pick 1 or 2, what motivated you and pushed you to want to continue to pursue your goals?
I think I can sum it in 1 word: passion.
Mm.
So it's like, you know, that thing that you have on the inside, that little burning fire that just needs to be fueled.
Yeah.
That's what it is. A lot of us have that thing, that passion, but then we are afraid to pursue that passion because it seems impossible. It seems too big a dream. So we just suppress it and we do the things that are more commonplace and the things that are more comfortable. And we let the little fire on the inside with the passion just like simmer down. We simmer it down, cover it up so that it doesn't burn any further. And for me, it was just that passion that I kept putting a little fuel to every day. And that's what motivated me to keep going, because the journey was hard, but because of that passion, I was able to withstand the hardness of the journey, the toughness of it. So then I did that. That year I would drop off because my daughter wasn't in school yet. She was still going to daycare. So, and I remember their daycare was in Buchanan and I lived in Barron Springs, Michigan. And so I would get up early in the morning, drop them off at daycare at like 6 o'clock in the morning. And then I'll go to Lake Michigan College, do my classes until noon. And then I'll go to Southwestern Michigan College, do my classes there until 5. And then I'll go pick up my kids and then come home and do whatever I have to do with my kids. By 8 o'clock, they were in bed and I would be studying, doing my homework, doing whatever I have to do from 8 p.m. usually until midnight or 1 o'clock. And then I'll be up at 5 o'clock the next morning, ready to go. So that was like my whole entire year. So at the, like a little over halfway through the year, because remember, I have a calendar and I have a goal. I have to accomplish this by this time, this by this time. So it was during that time I was taking those classes that I needed to take the MCAT to be able to stay on target. And so I started studying for the MCAT. I actually
did you even have your bachelor's?
I did not. So I saved, I saved my little coins and I paid for a prep course because I knew a prep course would help me, because by the time I would take the MCAT, I still would be finishing up the classes that were required for the MCAT. So I wasn't completely done with the classes, but I had to stay on schedule. So I took a prep course, it was the Kaplan prep course, and it was so helpful for me. So at night, twice a week, I would go to Andrews University where they were doing the Kaplan prep course, and I would be in there with all those like, biochemistry measures and all this and all that. And I would be like, okay, all right. And I would just focus and just study and just learn what I needed to learn. So I took the MCAT and did well, and then finished up my classes. And so now I have the MCAT, I have a great score, I have my associate degree in nursing, and and I'm like, time to apply for medical school. So I applied to medical schools, and with the promise that I would have my bachelor's degree by the time I start medical school. So I applied to medical school in July, August, and I would be starting medical school that next year. So now I needed a bachelor's degree.
In 1 year.
In 1 year. And so, there is a university called Siena Heights University that is affiliated with Lake Michigan College. It's on the Lake Michigan College. They have a campus on Lake Michigan College. Mm-hmm. And so I went there and I told them, okay, this is the story. I am actually starting to get interviews for medical school, but I don't have a bachelor's degree, and I need that to be able to start medical school. And I remember talking to the lady, I don't even remember her name, but I remember talking to a lady there, and she was like, yeah, well, you're not going to be able to get a bachelor's degree in a year if you need to have a bachelor's degree by next year, because you need 62 credits. I don't know what you need now, but at that time, if you had an associate degree, you needed 62 credits to get a bachelor's degree. And so I told her, well, there has to be a way, because I'm on a schedule, tight schedule.
My schedule, not yours.
So there has to be a way. And I told her, well, let's talk to the director, to whoever can make this happen, let's talk to them. So she was gracious enough to get me, I don't even remember what director she was, if she was the dean or somebody who knows how to do things. And she got me this lady, and this lady was like, well, it's gonna be hard, because she looked at all my stuff, and then she said, well, there's this degree that you can get, which is called a bachelor's degree in applied science, that we use for people who are already working as nurses, respiratory therapists, or even like radiology technicians who already have an associate degree, and they are already working using their degree, and they need to get a bachelor's degree. So this will be perfect for you. I was like, I'll take it. So then she was like, we can do this. And how we'll do it is you have to attend some classes in person and some classes online. That's the only way you can do this many credits in one semester. So she hooked me up with 30 credits in a semester. And at the end of it all, I ended up being credited 2 credits. So I only needed 60 credits instead of 62. And she helped me with the schedule. I scheduled everything. And at this time I had switched, and I was working every weekend but nights. So it was so helpful. I had such a supportive team at work. Like, my workmates would be like, okay, when I come in to work, they'll give me the rescue nurse role, which was just going around helping other nurses, responding to codes and things like that. So I'd have time to be able to study. If there wasn't nothing going on, it wasn't night, it was quiet, nothing crazy going on, I could study. And so everybody was just cheering me on and so supportive. And that was that. I finished those 2 semesters. I graduated from Siena Heights. I didn't walk, but I graduated from Siena Heights.
Well, you still had more places to go. You don't have time to walk for a bachelor's. You go to medical school.
It was like, it's okay. And that June, I started medical school. So that's how it went down.
So most of us complain about having 12 credits or whatever.
Oh, it's hard.
Oh, I can imagine. You're probably the only person who's ever done that craziness. Because I didn't even know that a school could do that. I didn't even know you could fit that in anybody's calendar. So you have this passion burning inside you, And now you feel like you have, there's another word you use when you left was control. You felt like you had control over your life, which
Yes.
pushed you to make your own calendar, to advocate for yourself when there are so many obstacles that most of us would be like, listen, girl, just do your job, take care of your kids, and give up on these dreams because those were before. None of that was getting in the way. And the self-esteem that was almost taken away,
Yeah.
I feel like it was back because you were aligned.
So, you know, I tend to look at it in different things. So academically, I was very confident, and I had I knew, you know, it's like you have a purpose and you're passionate about something and you have a purpose that is bigger than you. You know that this is not just about you. This is about something that's bigger than you. So
Mm-hmm.
you have that fueling you and pushing you forward too. And so that's why it's so important to have a purpose in life. If you
Mm,
don't have a purpose, then you don't really have that push, you
yes.
know? So
Yes.
you need to have a purpose so you can be pushed in the direction of where you need to follow that passion. Like
Mm-hmm.
I feel like purpose pushes passion.
Mm,
And so
mm,
having that purpose, I had no time to second guess myself or to think that this was impossible, to think that I wasn't good enough to do it. I knew that because it was my purpose, God would give me whatever I needed to be able to succeed. But
yeah.
then when it came to the other aspect of life, that's a very important aspect of our lives, which is in relationships. There, my self-esteem, I had done no work there because
Yeah.
my focus was solely on my academic achievements so that I could accomplish my goal of becoming a doctor. Because, you know, when I was 18, when I had gotten pregnant, I'd seen my dad cry twice in my life. When his father died, who was like his ultimate best friend in the whole wide world, and when I got pregnant, because he said to me, "Oh, so now you're never going to become the doctor that you wanted to become because now you're going to be a mom. It's going to be so challenging." His heart just broke for me because he felt and he thought that I would not be able to achieve my dream of pursuing medicine because it was going to be so much more difficult now.
Mm-hmm. And I see that. Wow. So that clarification that is so important, and that we usually confuse the two. So you had been beaten down in relationships and your self-esteem, and I mean, even those tears were probably like, oh, there goes not only her dream but our dream of seeing our daughter becoming a doctor. Like,
Right.
just it's all over in his sense, in his mind. But you knew that you still can do it because the passion and the purpose you just talked about. But that never doesn't really translate into the social part or the
No,
relationships. And
no.
usually see these successful people or people who have managed to make a mark on the world, and we just assume they've got it all together because if you can make it through 60 credits in class and be on top of your class and have a job and raise great kids, like, oh, she's got it, right?
Yeah,
But yet that does not translate in
no.
the other part of your world. So
Yeah,
some of those messages you're able to undo in your
yes,
academic life,
right.
but they would still show up in your relationships.
Exactly.
Oh.
And
Mm.
so it's like, you know, and in medical school, I started dating.
Hmm.
And, you know, like I always say,
So you were not damaged goods. People still wanted you. Look at that. Come on,
but
this.
like you, who knew, single mom with two kids going through medical school. But, you know, it's like, yeah, you realize, okay, I'm not damaged goods, but then I don't think I had done the work necessary. Not, I don't think, I know I had not done the work necessary to heal from that first marriage, you know, because you think, oh, I'm okay. I'm still able, I'm now in control of my life. I am pursuing my dreams. I'm okay. But are you really okay?
Mm-hmm.
You know? And
Mm-hmm.
so it was that time that I started dating. And shortly after, well, when we graduated, he was also in medical school with me. When we graduated medical school, we got married. Like we were the best of friends. But then come residency, which is a totally different ball game. Residency is hard. Surgical residency is hard. And he was also pursuing a surgical specialty. And so it's like now you have two surgeons in training in the house who are working at least 80 hours a week. So it makes it very difficult to nurture your relationship and to put in the work that's necessary for a marriage to grow. Because when we were in medical school, it was so easy. We lived together. And then it's like now we had a year apart where things were okay. And then I moved to New York. That's how I ended up in New York, because I started my residency in Michigan, but then ended up in New York because he was doing his residency in New York. And so now you have these two people who are both very type A personalities, because I thought, oh, it's easy. You just be with somebody who's like you.
And who gets it? Because you're both doing this exact thing. Yeah.
They're training to be a surgeon. You're training to be a surgeon. It's totally fine. But I tell women now that it doesn't work that way. You need somebody who is as different from you as possible. And so it's like, it doesn't matter how much you like each other as people and how much you love each other. When you don't put work in your relationship, it is not going to grow and it will just disintegrate. It's going to be that lawn that's sitting there that's not being watered. That falls. And so that's what ended up happening with this marriage, because I was so focused on my career, on my residency. And in residency, you really have no control over your time.
Right.
And he was focused on his training. And so we really did not put in that effort to really put in the work necessary to make a marriage work. And we grew apart and just things ended up not working out. And so now, it's like during residencies when I went through that divorce, and it was hard. Like, it was hard. Waking up every morning to go to work. Like, there are days when I was so depressed, I did not want to get up. But, with my faith in God, I was able to get up every morning, smile. Like, I had two friends at work who knew what was going on. Nobody else knew until I mentioned it at graduation. Nobody knew that I had gone through a divorce.
So let me ask real quick over there on that part, because what was your not motivation? What was your reason for not sharing? I'll put it that way.
So I think sometimes there are things that you need to keep to yourself when you're going through that struggle. And you can share it once you have passed that hill, It's not, you don't have to share everything that you're going through. That's not being transparent. Like, we're like, oh, I'm being my authentic self. I'm being transparent. You're just oversharing. And you're not focusing on what you need to do for healing and growth. And when you're going through some deep, dark things, you need that time to yourself to be able to heal, to be able to grow, to be able to get past that difficulty and come out on the other side better than what you were going in. And that requires work on your part. And you don't need, and another thing is also, I didn't want anybody's pity. I didn't want anybody feeling sorry for me. I didn't want anybody, I didn't want that episode in my life to basically cloud what I was doing in my work. And I didn't want that to change the way that I was. I was going to continue putting in 120% in my work regardless. And it's hard to compartmentalize, but you have to,
Did culture have any part to play in that decision making?
So I think for me, I grew up with a mom who always, like, let me put it this way. When that article went viral about, my life story that my friend Vimbai did, my sister was like, oh my goodness, if Rose was still alive, she would be you airing your dirty laundry like that. Oh my goodness,
Yes.
So I can tell you that having a mom who was very much, you keep your business in the house and you do not air your dirty laundry. And because her thing was always like, I used to get into it with her all the time. She'd be like, oh, what are people gonna say? You know? And I'm like, I don't care what people are gonna say. But that was like how she was brought up. And
Yes.
so it's like, and I want to go back and say, for my parents, they were so heartbroken that I did not feel comfortable enough to tell them when I was going through the abuse in my marriage. And I had to explain to them that it had absolutely nothing to do with them, because I knew my parents loved and supported me and would come and pack my stuff for me and bring me back home themselves if they knew that was what was going on in my home. But it was more about what I had in my thinking about the whole situation and how I didn't want them to be embarrassed and to have to go through all that again. And so it's, it's kind of the thing with my mom. She was always very, very private. And
Yeah.
so that kind of does translate into some of my decision making. And so with that instance at work, I didn't want pity. I didn't want, airing my dirty laundry to everybody there at work. And also I was the only Black resident in the program the whole time I was there, the only Black categorical resident in that program. And so I also felt the burden of being the only and not wanting the stereotypes of Black people to be made true, for them to be like, oh, well, yeah, that's just how Black people are. I didn't want any of that to cloud anything. So I also felt I had to be the poster child of a Black woman in that residency program, because that's all they saw, that's what they had. And I didn't want to, I felt that burden of being almost perfect for that purpose, which is another completely different story when it comes to struggling with perfectionism. So yeah.
Perfectionism is also a trauma response that is usually a little bit more acceptable because it makes you achieve what you need to achieve to be in society. But I was just hearing and seeing a lot of different messages and Baton's just playing a role in one situation.
Yes.
And a lot of similarities, right? Like you're from Zimbabwe, I'm from Rwanda, but usually all Africans operate with the same rules. You keep your your dirty laundry within your household. And now your parents are disappointed or sad that you didn't go to them.
Yes.
Also not realizing that they taught you and trained you to take care of your business, right? And now you're a married woman.
Yes.
So, and the same thing, like I'm newly divorced, but I did the same thing. I kept it to myself, went and did my work, went to therapy, did all this, and of course still in school. And I didn't even tell my siblings or my dad till like way
when everything is okay. Yeah.
Yes. Realizing, right? Like, so we explain it in whatever way we want to explain it. You don't want pity. You don't, you want to figure it out yourself first before you even get all these other opinions. And
you don't want to stress them out. They're aging. You don't want to stress them out. My parents were like, probably like 50s then. I'm like, I don't want to, they're aging. I don't want to stress them out.
But also sometimes their own understand, like, sometimes what their messages have been around marriage, like that's what happens. You always stay, you fight it, like, so you want to figure out even where you are before. So I totally get it, but that's why I was asking to get to that part of those messages that fuel how we analyze the situation, and sometimes unconsciously, because like my mom, same thing, very private, and you put on your pretty face and go do what you gotta do. Nobody's interested in your drama or in your problems. Do your job and figure it out on your own. So, wow. Whew, that's a lot to carry in addition to doing medical school, which is difficult on its own, even if you're living a perfect life. So you made it through. Now you've made it through three big events in your life before you hit. At this point, how old are you? Your early 30s?
So I went through my divorce. I was like maybe 33. Yeah.
Yeah, so you're in early 30s and you make it through residency, obviously.
That's divorce number 2. So you're like, oh my gosh.
Right. So this is adding a little something to your psyche in relationships, right?
Yes.
So you still got it and it's all going really well academically and career wise, but you're now adding another layer of, because a lot of people in society make that to seem like a failure. And
Yes. Oh,
usually
yeah.
from a woman.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Like a man is allowed to have 20 divorces and nothing changes about how he's viewed, but so now that make it like failure number two, even if you had nothing to do with all that crap, and but while succeeding in your career,
Yeah.
and how you make those two balance and fit. So yeah, so fast forward.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
So fast forward, finish residency. And I think this for me now, we are getting to the nitty gritty of, yes, going through the divorce was hard, one of the hardest times in my life. But then, my chief year, a few months before I graduated from residency, like you can now see the light at the end of the tunnel. You have worked so hard. And, my mom had been there every single way and praying for me and motivating me and encouraging me. And then she's diagnosed with stage 4 inflammatory breast cancer. Very aggressive, triple negative. So like it was just so aggressive. From the time she was diagnosed to the time she died, it was like 3 weeks. So, and that was 2 months before I graduated from residency. So I was so devastated because this is the woman who, when I was like in 4th grade, she decided she wanted me to go to a private school. And so she would wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning, get me up, get me ready to get me across town to the other side, like across many towns to where this private school was. I'll go to school during the day, learn. She would wait for me because it was so far away. She would wait for me at the end of the school. She would take me home because at the time we didn't have a car. And so this is somebody who had sacrificed so much. And the one thing I wanted her to see was me graduate as a general surgeon. And 2 months before graduation, she died. So for me, that was such, just heartbreak. That was just so heartbreaking. But I didn't have time to grieve because I was finishing residency. I had to take my general surgery boards. I had to move across country to Nebraska where I was going to be studying my transplant surgery fellowship, which was like 2 years of the most difficult thing that I've ever done in my life. And so it was like, there was no time to sit and grieve. My program was gracious enough to allow me to be at home for a week, after the funeral. So I got to, get myself together and then go back to school and to New York to finish my residency. But it's like going through that. And then, you as a child, you can't help but just think back and have regrets. Like, man, I wish I was such a better daughter to her, you know? And so it's like things like that you start thinking that it's just normal life, but you're like, I just wish I had been just a better daughter to my mom, that I had just not brought her so much, so much, embarrassment. But I knew my mom loved me so much and she was so proud of me. And she had told me when I was going through my second divorce, she was like, it's okay. You have to do what is best for you and you have to do what makes you happy and what's healthy for you and what's healthy for your kids. And she was like, I know you say you'll never get married again, but I still have faith that you're going to get a good man who's going to love you and treat you like a queen. And now I wish my mom was there to see my husband, who is like the best husband ever, who treats me like a queen. And I'm like, all these things that my mom was telling me when I was going through all that difficult time came true, but she wasn't able to see it. So, it's like now I had to go through that. And I got interested in learning about grit and resilience because that was the time that, to me, I realized that I had grit.
For real.
Before all that, yes, I went through all those difficulties. I experienced all those things, but it's like I didn't realize, I never had to really truly dig deep within for strength. And it's like, for me, because of my faith in God, I relied so heavily on God. I mean, there was this song that's called I Can't Even Walk Without You Holding My Hand. It was literal for me because I could not do anything without God just holding my hand and guiding me. And I had this mental picture in my mind of Jesus just taking me by the hand and walking me through every single day of those difficult days. So that's when I got interested in grit and resilience. And that's what eventually got me through transplant surgery fellowship. Because transplant surgery fellowship, oh my gosh, it was not like general surgery, where with general surgery residency, you have an 80-hour work week rule. So you can't work more than 80 hours a week. But with transplant surgery fellowship, it's a fellowship and you don't have those work hour restrictions. And the kind of training that it is, it's a two-year program, and it is the most difficult program you can do because of the night and day hours that you do. You're flying all over the country, for organ procurements. You're coming back, you're transplanting, you're taking care of patients on the floor, you're doing this, you're doing elective surgeries. It's so much to learn, so much to do, that if you don't have that grit, you will not survive it. So that's how I ended up, actually feeling like, okay, I am a resilient person. And then fast forward to here I am now.
Oh my God. I mean, yes, if grit and resilience were a person, for real, it would be you. 'Cause every time you felt like this is a difficult stage, it feels like something bigger would happen in your life.
Yeah.
That would have knocked you off your feet, and you are not giving up.
No.
And I think, right, like as Adventists, we don't believe in somebody watching you from heaven. But
yes,
really, like sometimes I wish I did, because
I do too.
I mean, I really am at this stage where I don't know what I believe in terms of what happens when someone dies. And I think it's a conversation that everybody looks at differently. Yeah. But I want to find comfort in knowing that I feel like your mom already knew that you had what it would take to get to all the places that you are now. And that even in, her saying that she believes you're going to find that guy, that she believes, I feel like she had that knowledge that is a little farther than what we have.
Yeah.
That you have the comfort that it will always work out for you, because her prayers, she knew, would not go in vain.
Yes. And that's that, really. Just her prayers would not go in vain.
And they didn't. Here you are, happily married, pregnant, achieved it all against all odds.
Yes.
What an inspiration.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Oh my God, I'll tear it up thinking about your mom and how proud she is. She would.
I know you get it. You like.
I do.
It. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you for spending this time with us, for sharing your journey, for being so authentic and vulnerable. I'm become emotional about these things, but
you're too sweet.
I think one of the biggest batons that kind of inspired me to even start talking about these things was how our cultures are silent about the things we go through, right? And so you're going through this in isolation, and somebody else is going through exact same thing in isolation, and we're all hurting in our own spaces.
Yes.
But when there is power and healing in community, and if you never shared your story, there's a woman being abused right now who thinks there's no future and can look at you and know that there is tomorrow, and they can make it through.
Yeah.
2 kids, 5 kids, 20 kids.
Doesn't matter.
Cool. And that your dreams are not done just because of the obstacles.
Absolutely.
You're an amazing human, but you're not Superwoman, right? So if you can do it, somebody else can too. And so that's the power of this. And I shared before we started recording that one time I was about to quit. I literally, I had typed out my email to my advisor, like, you know what, I gave it my best, but I am done. Like, I got 3 kids to raise. I have this nonprofit. It's like my passion. I'm already doing what I want to do in life. But also, I knew my goal was always to get this degree.
Yeah.
And I put in all this time, but I'm like, sometimes it's okay to know when to quit. So I'm telling myself all these stories, and I heard your story, taking 60 credits, working night. And I'm like, you know what? At least give it another semester.
Yes.
So we just don't know what our stories can do. So thank you for sharing that. Thank
You're
you for
very
being here.
welcome.
And so I
Oh,
hope everybody who's listening, who's going through a hard time, who's been told all these messages, you are damaged goods, you can't do it, and this is it for you, whatever it is, that it's not. There's always a new beginning with each day, and there is hope.
absolutely.
And I used a lotus flower as my logo for when I redid my thing because of the story behind it, right? It grows in the mud and it comes out to be this beautiful flower that it's not where you come from, it's not your story, it's not your trauma that determines your future, your outcome. So we all can do it as long as we analyze and do the work to know which batons no longer serve us. So we drop those and keep the ones that will keep us going, such as resilience and grit and compassion and purpose and values. So thank you, Praise. Thank you all for
Very
listening.
welcome.
And here's to a happy 2021 of being more resilient and going after what we want and changing the future for your kids, because now they have a future and a mother to look up to who has overcome all kinds of crazy obstacles. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
And Evas, how can people find you before I let you go? How can people know where to? I know you do a lot of things in addition to saving lives every day. So give us, how can people find Praise and follow all the great work you do?
So you can find me at, I think it's actually Dr. Praise Matemavi on Instagram. And I think my biggest thing that I'm actually very proud of is my podcast, which is Living Life with Passion and Purpose podcast. And you can listen to it on Spotify and iTunes and like Apple Podcast, wherever you listen to your podcast. And there we have conversations with regular women who are doing extraordinary things with their lives, like just getting up every morning and taking care of your kids and making sure they are well fed, they're well taken care of, they go to school. That to me is extraordinary. So just regular women who, you'd just say, this is my neighbor, who African women who I feel like a lot of times African women's voices are very suppressed, Black women's voices are very suppressed. And this is just a place where we can have conversations and talk about things. So I really enjoyed the podcast, and you can find us there.
All right, thank you. Yes, please subscribe and listen to all those wonderful podcasts. And I always, I know there's some books on Amazon that you have written. So just too much, you're forgetting something. So I'll have all of these also posted on my social media. So thanks again, and thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Right. I will stop.